6:07, Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Good morning to you, friends. Hope you are doing well. Tuesday feels like a Monday. A lot of people, I'm not going to replay the Rosie O'Donnell bit, but I did play Rosie O'Donnell's apology to MAGA at the end of the last hour. A lot of people asking, it's a fair and valid point. Rosie, you moved to Ireland to get away from all this stuff. Why does she keep talking? I mean, listen, Ireland is a free country too, but it's like, man, like if you're not happy and you moved away from America, then just stop paying attention. Have fun in Ireland. Go drink. Go eat potatoes, whatever they do in Ireland. But just, God's sakes, leave us alone. Anyway, so that is part of what we covered in the last hour. Donald Trump-related news. Oh, and by the way, I'm trying to set up an interview real quickly with Matthew Hurtt, who I'm hoping he could join us at 6:35. So, Louis, at 6:35, Matthew Hurtt is going to be joining us. So you want to get his photo ready for the stream. Watch us on YouTube and Facebook and X, 997WTN.com, Rumble as well. You can watch the radio show. You can listen to it on the radio, of course, and on all the streaming apps as well. And we've got a lot going on this morning. Appreciate you listening to Super Talk, 99.7 WTN. So there was a bit of a conspiracy theory, or whatever you want to call it. We're going to talk to Matthew about this over the 6:35. But over the weekend, liberals, they said that Donald Trump died over the weekend, which was so bizarre. Sam, were you keeping up with all of this?
I was.
Over the weekend?
Yes.
So there was never any kind of proof that Donald Trump had died. I mean, where were they getting all of this from? I mean, he had just simply not been on camera for, 4 or 5 days, whatever it was.
I think 3 days.
3 days!
And they panicked. So I think it's part of the TDS.
I don't think, by the way, I don't think panic is the right word. I think that they were engaged in wishful thinking.
Well, so like the allegations on social media that he's a body double. That's what we're seeing now. Like they've been zooming in on pictures and trying to over-interpret, as I would call it, little minute differences in Trump's appearance from certain angles and certain lighting and certain times of the day.
Photographs where they're looking at his smile and the formation of his eyes.
And the brow line.
The brow
and around
line,
the neck
the whole
and
thing.
everything. And I think it's because they hate him, but if he's not out there, then, what are they supposed to get angry at? Like that's kind of the mentality. They need something to obsess over, and when that thing has been removed, well, now they're going to freak out and start making, wild accusations.
The problem is if Donald, obviously he's not dead, but if he was dead, okay, now what are you going to hate on? Now we're going to focus on your performance, Democrats. You know what I mean? So if they don't have Donald Trump to hate over or hate on, well, then they have nothing that binds them together because as we covered for you last week at the DNC, where they couldn't even, the Democrats, the only thing they could agree on was their hatred of Donald Trump. So if he's gone, which he's not, but if he's gone, well, then what do the Democrats cling to? Well, they can't agree really on anything. They certainly can't agree over Hamas and Israel and who they support in that conflict. Obviously, a lot of conservatives would support Israel. The Democrats, by and large, they support Hamas. I mean, there was, and by the way, the other thing that they're doing, Sam, I don't know if you saw this, but they're looking at Trump's posts over the weekend on True Social, and they're looking at the vernacular that he used to make these big, long Trump-like posts on True Social, and they're saying he's never used that word before, whatever that word is. He's never sounded this literate before, because that's one of the things that they said was his posts were better written than they usually are. Therefore, it can't be Donald Trump that is posting to his own Truth Social. So that's also part of the conversation. for the life of me, as time continues to go on here in Trump's second administration, I do find it funny that the Democrats are just so crazed with all of this. And so one of the things as we continue to talk about all of this is the fact that the Democrats are still having a hard time figuring out who they do support in the battle between Gaza and Israel. And again, not to belabor the point, but most conservatives know who we do support. We do support Israel. There's a lot of Republicans or conservatives, whatever, that don't support Israel. And I fully understand that. I actually said during the podcast that Chris and I did the other day that I can make the argument both ways. I can effectively make the argument that if we are truly America first, then we shouldn't be helping to protect Israel. I don't believe that, but I can make the argument. But I do believe that we should protect Israel. But Rashida Tlaib, did you hear this? Need some video, Louis. And so Rashida Tlaib making news this morning, a fiery speech over the weekend. She was speaking at an event where America was called an evil country. I want you to listen to this, because this is Rashida Tlaib at her whack jobbiest.
They thought they could kill us, rape us, imprison us, violently uproot us from our olive tree farms, starve our children to death, and we would disappear. Well, guess what? Now we're in Congress, and we're every corner of the United States. Y'all, they just don't get it. They just don't get it. They will never truly comprehend, even after 7 decades, that we aren't going anywhere. We are just getting started. I want to say to all of them, every genocide enabler, look at this rooms, motherfuckers. We ain't going anywhere.
You ever notice that for these Democrats to get a really loud applause, they have to drop down an MFer? That's what she did. And by the way, obviously, I'll say it for all of us, obviously she conveniently forgot that Hamas slaughtered 1,200 innocent Israelis. Completely forgetting to mention that. And so the more that you listen to the absurdity of, Rashida Tlaib's arguments and some of these people that support Hamas, they really, just like Rosie O'Donnell, they just have no credibility because in their minds, Hamas can do no wrong and Israel can do no right. And there's no possible way in the mind of a Rashida Tlaib, there's absolutely no way that Hamas could be in the wrong and Israel could be victims. Because in the mind of someone like Rashida Tlaib, Israel deserved it. And that, to me, is horrifying. To me, you can go back and you can, when it comes to October 7th, when Hamas went into Israel, killed those 1,200 plus, Hamas killed those 1,200 plus Israelis, to me, it was sort of like a new beginning of this conflict between Israel and Hamas, in Israel and Palestine. Because for me, again, you read about this and they had some relative peace going into that. And then Israel caught with their pants down, obviously. And Hamas came in after partnering with Iran and their Revolutionary Guard and did what they did. And Israel now is doing what it has to do. And you may have heard over the weekend, there's a group that is accusing Israel of legal genocide. Now, we're going to talk about that coming up. It is 6:15, time to check the roads on WTN. As far as your weather today, cloudy, a couple of showers, a heavy thunderstorm maybe as well. Watch for flooding, high today of 79, feels like 80 degrees, and low of 61. Appreciate you listening to Nashville's Morning News. So there is this group. Maybe you heard about it. It was all over the socials, because there's so many people that are Israel haters, right? So now there is a group that is accusing Israel. These are like genocide scholars, I guess. And they are now saying that Israel's actions in Gaza against Hamas and the killing of these Palestinians meets the definition, the legal definition of genocide. Well, here's my 2 cents on that, is that Israel is simply defending itself against the next attack. And Israel, as you can imagine, they are doing what Israel would do, and anyone would, is they're denying that they are taking part in any kind of a genocide. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to replay for you what Marco Rubio said, I think, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, I think it was. And I've played this for you once already, and I played it over the Red Eye Radio network. But I think that Marco Rubio, he is spot on when he says, as he was verbally accosted by some, Israel hater, Hamas supporter in the airport, and the Secretary of State says, you know what, Hamas deserves everything that they're getting. Remember this?
Senator Rubio, will you call for ceasefire?
No, I will not.
Gaza?
On the contrary.
Rubio,
are you filming it?
Wait,
so I want you guys to get this. I want them to destroy every element of Hamas they can get their hands on. These people are vicious animals who did horrifying crimes. And I hope you guys post that.
And what about the civilians that are being
Hamas.
killed every day?
Hamas should stop hiding behind civilians, putting civilians in the way. Hamas knew that this was going to lead to this. So Hamas should stop building their military installations underneath hospitals.
So you don't care that 15,000 have died? You don't care about the babies that are being killed every day?
I think it's horrifying. I think it's terrible, and I think Hamas is 100% to blame. That's what I think. Make sure you post that, please.
I love that. Make sure you post that. And he's right. I mean, we've talked about all of this, friends. We've talked about how Hamas will bury their weaponry in the tunnels underneath residential buildings, under schools, under hospitals. That's where they have the hostages as well. I mean, I could go on and on. You know all of this by now.
It's not just their strategies. It's also that they quite literally have said in open forums and discussion amongst themselves that they welcome death for them and their constituents.
It's a death cult.
They don't care.
They don't care. That's right. And also, let's not forget that on October 8th, you also had the people of Gaza celebrating the 1,200 plus Jews that were killed in Israel. And let's also not forget that on September 12th of 2001, they were also celebrating in Gaza the deaths of 3,000 plus Americans, again, on September 11th. So I'm sorry, folks. I don't feel sorry for the people of Gaza. I don't. And for Marco Rubio and for, Benjamin Netanyahu, and I know that there's a lot of people out there that don't like Benjamin Netanyahu, and that's fine. But if you're concerned with America first, here's my argument to that. If you're America first, then how could you be for supporting Israel and helping Israel? Well, here's why. Because we get intel from Israel. And we have a valuable relationship with Israel that does benefit America. So for me, the more that we hear from Hamas, the more that we see of Hamas, the more that we engage with Hamas and the people of Gaza, the more I believe that Israel is in the right in doing what they're doing. And Hamas, you know what? They're the ones that are continuing to hold hostages. Hamas are the ones who, and we talked about this last week, who put out that video and that photograph of that seriously malnutritioned hostage as they were making him dig his own grave. Remember that whole thing? So before you start feeling sorry for the people of Gaza and Hamas and all that, think about what Hamas is guilty of. And think about the people that stand by Hamas in Gaza and celebrate the deaths of Americans and celebrate the deaths of Israelis, because that is what they do. It is 6:22, and Sam has the news coming up at 6:30. Sam, what you got? 6:37, Nashville's morning news on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Welcome on into a Tuesday. Feels like a Monday, and Matthew Hurtt, our grassroots political analyst, is joining us. Matthew, always great to have you on. So, did you buy any of the Donald Trump is dead thing that was going on over the weekend?
You know, I was reading an article this morning in Psychology Today about Donald Trump death rumors, and it's almost like a left-wing mass psychosis. They want it to be true. So people like Rosie O'Donnell, this thing was tweeted and shared on TikTok hundreds of thousands of times, and it confirms what they hope to be true. So they promulgate it, and of course Donald Trump, in true Donald Trump style, took to Truth Social and said, "Never felt better in my life." Of course, there was video over the weekend of him returning to the White House, quickly dispelling any, well, I would say quickly dispelling, but they still want it to be true. But it dispelled any myth or conspiracy that Donald Trump is dead.
He went golfing. He went golfing on Saturday, and they still, perpetuated this notion that, number one, Donald Trump was dead. Number two, I guess there are some people out there that are actually saying that Trump is, like a body double of Donald Trump. I mean, they're not helping themselves, Matthew. They're not helping themselves at all.
Well, about 100 of my closest friends, every time President Trump goes out to his golf course in Loudoun County, it's about an hour and a half away from where I live, there's a group chat of people who go to welcome him. So there's this organized conservative and MAGA grassroots group that holds up welcome signs to counter the protesters who do wish things like what were tweeted over the weekend, but can confirm about 100 of my closest friends saw him at the golf course on Saturday, and then, of course, he returned to the White House to continue making D.C. crime-free and all the other great things that he's doing.
So, speaking of which, do you have any, you're a very important guy. You're in the know out there in Washington, D.C. You're from Tennessee. But what is Donald Trump's big announcement today at 2 Eastern, 1 Central?
Look, I have not ever been on the correct end of guessing what President Trump is going to do next. And as is common on this show, Dan, I refuse to take a position and make a guess. I do think, though, from the headlines I saw over the weekend, it looks like there is some movement in the Russia-Ukraine matter. Which may show that Russia is ceding some of the situation there. I'm not sure. There were a couple of shootings over the weekend in D.C. I don't think any murders. So crime is still ridiculously down in the city. It might be an announcement about that. There are a lot of really great things happening domestically and as it pertains to foreign policy. So there could be any number of things.
So you talked about Washington, D.C., and how well things are going in D.C. I know that you saw, and I covered this earlier in the program, but, let's go Brandon Johnson, right, from Chicago, the Chicago mayor. You've got J.B. Pritzker and Brandon Johnson, both that are simply refusing, and really it seems to be threatening Donald Trump that if you try to bring the National Guard into Illinois, it is not going to go well for you. How do you think that's going to end?
We talked about this last week, Dan. The situation is you've got a Democrat governor, you've got a Democrat mayor, both of whom would cut off their nose despite their face. Crime is rampant in Chicago. We've seen in just about a month of National Guard activity in D.C., crime down dramatically. These individuals don't want to solve problems. Orange Man is bad to them, and they will oppose him at every turn, even if it is better for the city. And it's unfortunate. I think sometimes, or some of these things may wind up in the courts. There is precedent of presidents placing the National Guard into cities, places like Los Angeles and other Memphis and other places historically. And if it makes its way through the courts, I think the courts will affirm that in extreme situations like this, crime in Chicago, crime in Washington, D.C., that the president has authority on a limited basis to drop National Guard troops into a place. And I was in Eastern Market in Washington, D.C. over the weekend, and there were about a half dozen National Guard troops. Super polite guys. They were just outside the metro station, making sure that the neighborhood was calm. And as we've seen in video after video, residents of D.C. who are not ideologically opposed to Donald Trump, who just want to live, work, and make their way in the city, are generally pretty pleased with what's happened in D.C., and I think it would be the same for the folks who live in neighborhoods across Chicago.
There was Matthew Hurtt joining us, our grassroots political analyst. There was some polling done and it showed that the American people far and wide had major concerns about crime across America, including in some of these Democrat-run sanctuary cities. So how do you think this plays in the midterm elections? And if you're advising Donald Trump, what would you tell him to do?
You know, so this is a concern among voters, but most voters don't live in the crime areas. So this is something for your listeners. You know, not everybody who lives in the listening radius of the station is going to Nashville, and they're certainly not going to Memphis. It is a far-away crime. I do think it will be one of the top 3 or 4 issues if it continues like this into 2026. But many people are going to think about jobs, the economy, and what President Trump has done in that regard. I do think, though, you know, for people preparing to send their children to colleges in cities far away, that is a concern that becomes much more relevant. So you have situations where if I'm going to send my kids to UT Knoxville, or I'm going to send them up to D.C. or somewhere else, I'm going to be very concerned about that. It is not as tangible to a voter, a crime in a faraway city, as jobs and the economy right there in front of them. But it will play an important role in the midterm elections.
So how are you? And I'm gonna tell you what I'm gonna ask you. Then I'm gonna go to traffic, and then you can answer coming back. The economy seems like it just depends on who you ask as to whether or not the economy is doing well or not, right? Scott Bessent will say the economy is great, but then other economists that are anti-Trump will say the economy is tanking. So I'm going to get your opinion on the economy and where do you think it's going? And I realize that we are a long way away from the midterm elections, like a year and a half, I think, right? But I'm going to ask what your take is on the economy as it stands right now. That is coming up next. It is 6:45, time to check the roads on WTN. As far as weather goes, cloudy with a couple of showers and a heavy thunderstorm as well. Watch for flooding. A high of 79, feels like 80, a low of 61. Matthew Hurtt joining us on the Newsmaker Hotline. And Matthew, we have a year and a half before the midterm elections. So I don't know if today's economy will impact, obviously, what happens in the midterm elections. We got a year and a half to go. But, you know, if the election were held today, do you think the economy is good, bad, or ugly?
We can talk about it from a macroeconomic standpoint. I could say Q2 2025 real GDP was up 3%, and June wage growth was 4.2%. Most people don't have a grasp of what that means to them unless it's reflected in their paycheck. I think what are the costs of milk, bread, and eggs? Yep. What's the cost of gas? That's where it hits somebody in the wallet. What are the interest rates when people go to buy a home? And I think all of that is in flux. It's pretty stable and trending down. Inflation is down. It's not a major concern like it was last year. But all of these numbers can turn in a month or two. You know, real unemployment, most Americans aren't feeling unemployment. However, where I live, where unemployment has ticked up a percentage or two in Arlington, it's mostly federal employees. So it is
right.
It is exactly what you said. It is, what does it feel like to the person on the ground? Can they make the mortgage? Is it painful at the pump? And are the cost of eggs at Sam's or Costco outrageous? And I think all those numbers can change in the next 14 months.
They can change for the better or worse because you have all these economists that are saying that the real impact of these tariffs have not yet been felt. So you have some people saying, "Oh, you just wait, it's coming, it's coming." Well, they've been saying that for like 6 months.
Yeah, any economist is almost like they've got a crystal ball, and they're always going to predict the next crisis or the next boom or the next bust. What I say about crystal balls is those who use one to predict the future are often forced to eat ground glass. So I try not to make those kinds of predictions. Any of this can turn on a dime. Look, the average gallon of gas in Tennessee is $2.80. It's $3.05 in Virginia. I drove back from North Carolina yesterday, where I think I paid $2.83 a gallon outside Raleigh. And those are the prices that are going to matter most to the average American, to the average voter.
I saw on CNN, I think it was CNN, where they said the gas prices right now at this point in Labor Day weekend, actually, that gas prices are at the lowest level they've been in many years for Labor Day. So I think that the price of gas, obviously, as you know, this is something that directly impacts the price of everything else that's on the market, at the store. It's got to be transported one way or another. And if the price of gas is low, then that is positive for the economy and Donald Trump.
Absolutely. And I think we're 225 days into Trump's term. And again, we're at 3.3% growth in GDP. The unemployment rate is pretty stable. And the S&P 500 is up 6.8%. I checked my Robinhood. I don't play a lot in the stock market, but I checked it yesterday and was pleasantly surprised at the handful of stocks that I'm playing with. None of this is investment advice, Dan, as you know, but I think people are generally pretty complacent. And the problem is, though, on that front, is if people are generally happy with the economy, if they voted for Donald Trump in 2024 and everything seems to be going fine, they aren't quite as motivated to get out as the Vietnam War era protesters we see at No Kings rallies and all those kinds of things. So it does take a bit of an overcorrection among conservatives. If you're complacent, if you're happy with what President Trump is doing, it is even more important to get out in midterm elections and to organize. You've got this special election in Tennessee here.
Yep.
All of those things are much more important for conservatives to actually overcorrect and participate at a higher rate.
So Congress is back today, and I think they're back today,
Don't
right?
remind me.
Okay, the Congress is back today,
the
House and the Senate, and they're talking about, say it with me, a government shutdown. So I'm to the point now where I'm so bored of this conversation every 3 months. But I mean, what do you expect to happen in the next few months as they work towards, a budget or government shutdown? What do you think is going to happen?
This is a problem with Congress not doing its job. For the better part of 12 or 13 years, Congress has not passed a budget. We go from continuing resolution to continuing resolution. Most Americans don't care about it at all. It doesn't impact almost anybody outside of the Beltway. That said, we've got a governor's race in Virginia, and in 2013, I can tell you the government shutdown that summer with Senator Ted Cruz did have a disproportionate impact in the election. Most Americans, if the government shut down for a week, the federal government, most people wouldn't recognize and wouldn't realize it. This is managing from crisis to crisis. Congress needs to get its act together, pass a budget, and actually do what the voters sent them there to do what they are constitutionally authorized and compelled to do. I don't know if we have the political courage in Washington to get it done.
No, I don't think we do either. All right, last question here. You may have heard me talking about this in the previous half hour, but Israel is being accused of basically genocide, and so this is not the first time, of course. And I think that the headlines and the media is really, running with this narrative. And I guess my question is, do you believe that the American people, by and large, buy the accusation that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza when, the reality is we had 1,200 to 1,400 Israelis slaughtered here October 7th of a couple of years ago? And I feel like they're still defending themselves and they're still trying to root out Hamas, who continuously uses civilians as human shields. So I don't know. Do you think that's that moniker of, utilizing, genocidal tendencies, do you think that's going to stick with the American people?
I don't know if it applies here, Dan, but it is a concern that I follow as a small L libertarian, particularly in the foreign policy space. Does Israel have a right to defend itself? Yes. Is Hamas a clear and present danger to the existence of a free state of Israel? Yes. What are some of the things? It seems to me over the last couple of years, Prime Minister Netanyahu we've gotten really close to some kind of agreement, and then something has happened where they pulled back. And I just don't know what the end game is there. I am concerned about it. I think that there are many innocent Palestinians under the age of 18 who are not wrapped up in the terrorism of Hamas. And it's a humanitarian question, and I don't have the answer for it. And I think that we should look at all international news coverage with some level of skepticism, and I just don't know, Dan, and I'm concerned.
All right, thank you, Matthew. As always, how can people find you on X?
I'm on X at Matthew Hurtt, MattheWHurtt.
All right, we'll talk to you again soon. 6:53 on Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7. Sam Weatherford has the news coming up at 7 in for Joe and Jones. Sam, what you got?